welcome. For those ones who are just coming in, we ask you to please mute your microphones at all times for a smooth session. Thanks for attending this public event addressing COVID-19 through open government, which objective is to launch the development of the Open Government Action Plan of Belize. And in this season that we live in, we do it in response to the pandemic COVID-19. My name is Mike Mora. I'm a specialist of the Organization of American States, the specialist on digital government and open government within the Department for Effective Public Management here in Washington, D.C. It is a pleasure to be here facilitating this session. I will say a few remarks and then give you some instructions. This is not a regular webinar, so please bear that in mind. This is more a workshop, and we're going to get to that in a minute. In the first part, we'll have two introductory presentations by the government of Belize through Mr. Yacine Dujon, the CEO, Ministry of Tourism and Civil Aviation. He will be presenting the overall government response to the COVID-19. I want to thank Mr. Mike Singh from the Office of the Prime Minister and Mrs. Judith Alpuche, chair of the COVID-19 task force, who made every effort to be here for this presentation. We're going to have then a second presentation by Mr. Pepe Garcia, the senior officer for North America, Central America, and the Caribbean from the Open Government Partnership. Thank you both. And then a second part of the session is for all of us here connected, where we're going to have a dialogue in 3 breakout sessions on 3 specific sectors: economy and trade, secondly, health, and thirdly, on tourism. This session will have a moderator who later will give you guidance to start the discussion. Please follow me during the session, as I will be instructing you to take different actions to move on from one room to the other without disconnecting. The moderator to the health session is Mr. Juan Manuel Casanueva. He's in Mexico right now. And he represents the organization Social TIC. You'll see him in the camera as well. The moderator of the economy and trade session is Mr. Paco Smith. He's in Belize right now. Many of you know him well. He is with the organization Peace Movement, and you can also see him on the screen. And the moderator for the tourism session, it's me. I'm sorry for those participants attending that session, as you will have to suffer me a little longer. So I apologize in advance. Please, you will find in this session at the top tab something that we need you to do, and we need you to click on and get familiar with. That is the commitment template form. Again, as I said, it's in the top of the general room. You click on it and you will find a form, a fillable form that I need you to be aware of, as we want you to write on that form at all times during the session. Any idea that you have, fill it out, put it there. You don't need to save it, it's automatically saved, but please do use that. We're going to use it more individually during the second part of the session, but feel free to get familiar to that form at any time. This session is implemented within the context of the Transformation to an Open Public Administration in Belize project of the OAS and the Trust for the Americas, with support of the Embassy of the United States in Belmopan, and in coordination with the Belize Open Government Steering Committee. Many of those of the members of the committee are here present also in this call. The pandemic COVID-19 has shown to be capable of distressing almost all aspects of our very own existence. Each citizen, business, and government have faced it or suffered in different ways. The pandemic came unexpectedly, as well as all responses that we have seen. None of us was prepared to face such an emergency. Moreover, the losses around the world are plenty and difficult in terms of human lives or to the economies. As travels were restricted, economic activity was halted and impacted negatively countries relying primarily in sectors such as tourism, and also threatening the capacity of producers to continue growing their crops or distributing produce and supplies. To face this crisis and the recovery with a participatory approach, open government is addressing worldwide the importance of designing and deciding solutions that can match and benefit from the views and concerns of complementary actors, including government officials, citizens, the private sector, and others, many of those represented here in this session. In advancing open government in Belize through a multi-stakeholder co-creation approach, the Trust for the Americas and the Organization for American States are supporting during 2020 the process for developing Belize's first open government action plan. The action plan is intended to serve as the instrument to orient the actions of the stakeholders in Belize to accomplish certain specific open government commitments that are identified and agreed by governments and non-government actors in different topics and/or sectors. Given the diverse challenges posed by COVID-19 in Belize, the exercise of developing Belize Open Government Action Plan seeks to contribute to define priority areas in which open government could add more value or have a greater impact for COVID-19 related emergency response and recovery. I leave it there, but just for instructions, again, we're posting a link in the chat of this session right now. It's a short survey that is important for the project. We ask you to please be kind, take a moment during the next hour or so that we're gonna be here to complete it. We need it, and my colleagues be posting that on the chat. Be aware, we'll be also posting other links in the chat, but mainly for you to stay connected or for information. My colleagues, Ms. Audrey Robin and Ms. Melanie Burns, were connected here in this chat, and they're actually physically in Belize, are the project team in the ground, and they will be ready to respond to any questions that you may have. Just write in the chat here below, they'll be paying attention to them. For instruction, if you lose your connection, please get back to the general room, again, the general room, and then click on the breakout session that you want to attend if you're coming during a time where we're not meeting on the general room. Fifth, remember that there is a tab at the top of the page to the commitment editable form. Please use it. We need it in this process. Nothing is written in stone during this session, so feel free to write any ideas and as many as you would like on that form. Thank you very much. We appreciate your support and help with that, and I'm sure the whole process will be enlightened by that. A final reminder, please keep your microphone muted at all times. Lastly, this is not a solitary event. This is the beginning of this process of co-creating a Belizean Open Government Action Plan that is also accompanied by other events and activities, and therefore, I want you to make you aware and invite you now to participate in a hackathon that we are supporting with this project that aligns perfectly with this session today, as the hackathon will focus on the very same sectors that we're going to be talking in the different rooms today, right? Tourism, very important, health and economy and trade. My colleagues also will leave the link here in the chat to the hackathon, so you can consider participating in this hackathon. We believe it's going to be a breakpoint to innovate in the developing of solutions to counter COVID-19 in this sector. So please check on those links and not only think about joining the hackathon. If it's something that you're not much to do, please do share the information with within your networks, within your governments and institutions, civil society widely. We want to make sure that this is a very broad and comprehensive process. So through activities of this project that are fitting into this session and as the beginning, as the launching of the developing of the action plan, and to the hackathon. So be tuned also, and my colleagues will leave also additional information on how to keep connected in the chat. Without further ado, I will give the floor to Mr. Pepe Garcia, who's connected right here, right now. He's going to talk to us from the view of the Open Government Partnership. It will give us a good highlights about what is the open response and open recovery campaign that they've been following, and we'll illustrate it with some examples of what's going around the world that might be of interest in a setting such as Belize. So Pepe, thank you for joining us. The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you to everybody that is here. I'm going to share, well, first of all, I'm Pepe Garcia. I'm a regional coordinator for support to countries of North America, Central America, and the Caribbean. So of course, I will try to work with Belize in any open government project, and even to be part of the partnership. Well, what I'm going to present now is what we are doing at OGP to strategically promote open response and open recovery in COVID during this pandemic. Well, first let me talk to you about what's OGP in numbers. OGP, it's a partnership that has 78 countries and 20 local members. We have more than 3,000 civil society organizations working with us. We have co-created more than 4,000 commitments, like concrete commitments, in 268 action plans. And of course, we have like the accountability mechanism, our independent reporting mechanism, which has produced 350 reports on what these countries are doing and advancing international action plans. We focus on different policy areas, such as beneficial ownership, civic space, working with extractive industries, gender, fiscal transparency, right to information, justice, etc. That's what we traditionally work on thematically. So during this pandemic, OGP decided first to do one thing, and it was to extend or give the countries the possibility to extend their national action plans, taking to 1 year of extension to co-create or to implement their current national action plans. And then we created this campaign of open response and open recovery. What do we understand for open response? It's to ensure proactive and accurate disclosure of information, to facilitate open platforms, to mobilize community assistance for healthcare workers and vulnerable sectors, to make emergency procurement of medical supplies public and open, and to integrate transparency and inclusion and oversight in safety nets. For open recovery, we are trying to integrate transparency and citizen engagement and oversight in economic stimulus packages, safety nets, aid and budgetary flows, and also to empower civil society to follow the money. So to sum like these two strategic approaches, we're just trying to put open government practices through all the thematic approaches we can find during COVID. And well, we have a great response from the community. We've been talking to our country members and civil society leaders during these months, and they are trying to use OpenGov spaces to push forward these agendas and these approaches in different projects, and even changing commitments or creating new commitments on specifically aligned to open response and open recovery. For example, they are working in an accountability website on open response to include procurement, donations, etc. They are improving health data with the help of civil society organizations and even with the University of Costa Rica to improve their statistical models to make them better and public to predict the cases of COVID. They have also a joint effort with civil society to improve the transparency and openness on their subsidies on these programs for open recovery. In particular, one of them on that is called Bono Proteger, which is it's a protect grant to help people that has lost their jobs. And they are also doing something very interesting with the public innovation lab or something like that, that it's rethinking the new normal. How do Costa Ricans see Costa Rica in the new normality? In Paraguay, for example, they are using an integral approach, using OpenGov platform to provide accountability and guaranteeing access to information. They are combining government and citizens initiatives they have strong approach on accountability on budget expenditures and social programs, and they also adapted this platform of investments mapping to that it's a very well-known accountability platform working that they have in operation to expand accountability on COVID expenditure and other like social programs. In Ecuador, civil society used open response and open recovery to address the government through the multi-stakeholder forum. Their action plan was extended for a year, and they included key reforms to open contracting, open data policy, and public services delivery, among others, other commitments that they modified with this open response and open recovery approach. So they quickly adapted their national action plan. It was really good. The timing for Ecuador worked well. In South Africa, for example, we have emergency procurement of medical supplies with an extra effort of transparency. We also see an open approach to emergency relief and safety nets for the vulnerable sectors and to stimulus packages. And they are encouraging the extraordinary health budget to be managed in open budget principles. I think those are some examples. I wanted to bring examples here aligned to the topics that you are exploring now, like health, tourism, economy, and commerce. But the research is going on in OGP to have like these best practices and examples for you. I will send it to Mike so he can share it with you later. Sorry, Mike, I couldn't make it, but it's on our way. And well, so how's things going in other spaces? Yes, we have these specific examples of multi-stakeholder forums of OGP countries, OGP members working on specific activities of open response and open recovery. But we also launched a crowdsource platform or a crowdsource space to gather other best practices and examples of what are the other countries and civil society organizations and even private corporations, what are they doing to tackle COVID with open approaches. By now, we have more than 430 concrete submissions. More or less 340 are relevant to open government, coming from 73 different countries and 50 OGP members. More or less 60% of these cases come from the government, 21% come from civil society or CSOs, 10% from multiple actors, and only 5% from the private sector. We worked to systematize these examples and these best practices and worked with our partners to produce a guide to open government and coronavirus. So now we have this general guide and also specific modules on the different thematic approaches. For example, we have now a fiscal openness guide for COVID, public procurement, open data, inclusion and gender, justice, civic space, right to information, social safety nets, privacy protections, whistleblower protection and scientific integrity, international aid, misinformation and protecting freedom of expression, and protection, participation, and deliberation. And those are all the modules of our OpenGov guide for coronavirus. I will put the link at the end of the presentation. And we also are also promoting a constant dialogue with our partners and in a regional basis and with a thematic approach. So by now we had around maybe 8 dialogues, one for Africa, one for Americas, one from Asia, one from Europe. and to address the thematic approaches one by one. And we have like all the materials online. You can see the videos and go through the discussions to see if there's something valuable for their moment in Belize. Well, and of course, this we have also like certain difficulties with our country, the members of OGP, where they were acting against the principles of openness, mostly because of the response to COVID, because sometimes democracies have to discuss things really quickly, or they adopt measures that in the end affect other democratic spaces and practices. So we had 50 members suspended or altered their their right to information frameworks, 12 members restricted freedom of expression, more than half restricted freedom of assembly, of course, to have this social distancing and other measures that were temporarily necessary. 1 in 5 has restricted media freedom. 15 are using emergency powers, to include, for example, citizen surveillance methods. Juan Manuel can answer some questions about that. He's a veteran in those topics. And well, some other countries are introducing discriminatory emergency measures and other setbacks for the agenda. And we are working with them, of course, to go back to an open normality or a regular understanding on how can they respond to COVID without limiting civic space and human rights. That's what I wanted to share with you. If you have questions or comments, I will put my email down there in the comments in the chat, and please feel free to write me or send me a message. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pepe, for the presentation. Open Government Partnership definitely is a voice out there and is doing a lot. And so I did share a link to the Open Response, Open Recovery site of the OGP. As mentioned by Pepe, he's going to be sharing some more resources there. There is a lot of information besides what, of course, he presented very packaged in this presentation. And the intention of having Pepe was precisely give us an overview of what's happening around the world. It's not just Belize who's considering doing or aligning open government commitments. We heard how Ecuador quickly adapted and moved and shifted to a COVID-19 response through open government action plan. And so in this process, you are not alone, and you can see the different, you can visit, and I actually encourage you to visit and learn about the different experience of how open government has been activated around the world with this that appear in this site. I think it's going to be good for us in this process as we learn more about how's this thing of open government can really, what is the practical application of open government, and I think we can find answers there. So thank you very much, Pepe. For you, as I mentioned in the beginning, Pepe is the senior officer of the OGP to North America, Central America, and the Caribbean. So thank you very much, Pepe. We invite you to continue joining us in the chat, response to any questions that people might have, and join us with other subjects there. Okay, while I was doing my introduction and Pepe started, we were joined by Mr. Jachin Dujon, the CEO of Ministry of Tourism and Civil Aviation, who we see in the screen. Thank you for joining us, Mr. CEO Ministry. The idea here, thank you also for coming at a very short notice after our colleagues from the Office of the Prime Minister office and the task force couldn't made it, and it gave you an interesting task of telling us what has been the government response to COVID-19 and certainly on your court, which is something that we're very interested to talk about. Just for the benefit of the doubt and for your intervention here, we're going to have 3 breakout sessions after your presentation. There is one breakout room that is specifically geared to tourism. So there is going to be more discussion specifically on tourism. But nevertheless, the other breakout sessions on health and economic recovery and trade will most likely be also connecting to that subject. And again, not just this session. I don't know if you heard that part when I was introducing in the beginning. We're also going to have a hackathon. The hackathon, it is actually dealing with the very issue of tourism, connecting with these areas, right? To how to reactivate in a safe manner in terms of health and everything else. And of course, making it a vehicle for economic recovery as well in the country. So from the get-go now, I wish you the best on that endeavor as you lead this process in the future, but count with us with this project and with these settings precisely to help you in the process of thinking how you're gonna go about it. So having said that, I thank you again, and I'll give you the floor right now, Mr. Dijon.
Thank you very much, Mike, and good afternoon, everybody. My apologies on joining late. There were some connection issues. As you said, Mike, I am filling in for CEO Singh, who I've been working with on the topic at hand and the presentation I'll show you. Just for background, you mentioned that I am working with the Ministry of Tourism and Civil Aviation, both of which have been absolutely nullified by the impact of COVID-19. And we are also sub-chair for the Economic Stability/Recovery Committee, which is looking at mechanisms to try and have the economy bounce back in the wake of COVID-19. But in the case of time, let me get my presentation up on screen. One moment. So it's a long, lengthy presentation. I'll do my best to be curt and precise about it. But essentially, just summarizing the response that Belize has taken to COVID-19. The major impact date that we record is the 13th of March. That was the date that we received notifications that cruises and travel was going to be suspended. And from that point, there was an action and mobilization to try and look at combating both the medical and the public health components of COVID-19, as well as the economic components that it has left us with. So it's a 4-pillared approach, basically looking for the proper structure, an inclusive and open government structure, one that involves citizen engagement, one that involves basic science and medical research, and the other one is the use of technology to try and find different mechanisms to work around some of the impacts faced by COVID-19. And this, like I said, it's basically the attack that we have taken. We do not know for certain if it will be 100% effective. I don't think anybody does at this time. We've just been engaged in trying to find different ways and means to really circumvent COVID-19 at this stage until we're all hopeful that a vaccine or a cure is found for this disease. So the institutional response, again, really focuses around, there was a full shutdown. A lot of essential services were required to keep going, but there were a lot of offices that were completely closed. I'm trying to find the right players, respective of industry, respective of health, different legislative advisors to come together was one of the preliminary motivations that we had to do to try and get back on our feet. And for this to be done, there were basically 3 tiers of leadership that were put in place. The first was an oversight committee which was led by the Prime Minister, chaired by the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition, and in the bipartisan political system that we have. So there were representatives that were selected from both public and private sector to report to the Oversight Committee. And the second tier of this was an executive task force, again led by one of my colleagues in the CEO caucus and an executive team that was put together. And the task force was chartered with essentially collaborating the information, ensuring that there was a smooth communication flow, accurate information was going to the Oversight Committee, and to lend advice in the decision-making process. And the third tier under this were the separate subcommittees that were put together. Initially, I believe there were about 9, but as things progressed, a lot of them were amalgamated for the need to share information or share technical personnel that sat on the subcommittees. As I mentioned before, the subcommittee that I'm most aware of in terms of the works is the Economic Stability Subcommittee. That's the one that tourism was asked to participate on and to co-chair. And again, there were subcommittees for health, for security, for all sorts of other measures that had to be taken into consideration during the impact. And so the need for, I guess, these layers and these committees to really communicate and to be efficient about the chain of information, the new updates. There was a lot of false information that was circulating. And so there had to be mechanisms within the mechanisms to ensure that decisions that were being made based on strong policy and on empirical research that was being done at the time. We have a lot more information now than we did a few months ago with regard to COVID-19. We've been successful in I guess beating a curve, if you can call 23 cases a curve, but certainly we've been successful in keeping a large spread of the virus out of the country. The movements for this required quick legislative changes, quick communication with public society, quick variations when we have not been able to get medical testing equipment, or we've gotten equipment that has failed us, or we've gotten testing kits that have given us false negative reports. It's all been a very quick and rapid learning process. And so I keep saying quick and I keep saying effective. This really is the name of the game. Mistakes have been made, but we were very fast in remedying them. And I think that the overall response, the involvement of policy development, the ability to mobilize legislative framework within record time, the ability to set public health guidelines and to actually implement them, whether using law enforcement or medical advice, or in some cases just the support of the private sector in trusting the government, has been vital to this process. Following the medical advancements and following the lessons learned by other countries has been pivotal to some of the decisions made here. Between April and we're in June now, I understand that there are over 40 different test kits for COVID-19, and the success rate varies from anywhere between 9% success rate to higher numbers that are about 95 to 100% accurate. But again, all of this, like I said, comes at you at 100 miles an hour when you're in the planning phase. So, you know, the medical professionals here have been in and still are in constant contact with medical practitioners, both in the Caribbean and in Central America. Again, lessons learned and experiences shared have been circulated around. In the beginning, we had a lot of challenges in terms of equipment that was ordered and had to be shipped through the United States, and due to their executive order, some of those testing materials were confiscated, and could not make it to Belize without strong negotiation. Now, one of the parameters that falls into this is really finding methodologies to ship testing equipment to Belize that to avoid going through the United States due to this standing order that's still in place for PPEs and other medical gear. But to keep moving, the roadmap that was selected and which we still are utilizing to date involves testing, tracing, and collaboration. And so once we decided that the antigen PSR test kits were the ones we were going to use, we had to look at numbers. We had to look at whether or not maintaining open borders and airports was something that could be done. This, of course, has had a huge negative impact on the tourism sector, as well as other businesses that require transportation and travel for their success. But it did enable us scale down the area and the target that we needed to do the contact tracing in. And so what we're able to do once people were not moving in and out of the country, were essentially to take it in zones and start doing contact tracing and limiting people's mobility to move in and out of those zones, so that we could actually isolate those who were infected and focus on basically moving into the different areas for either treatment or sanitation or whatever needed to be done in beating the curve there. The third component, which is the social collaboration involving the lockdown, the social distancing, the biosecurity protocols that are being shared right now with the public, is also a huge component of this. We've seen a rise in people's public awareness of the need to use protective equipment. We've seen a huge demand in the availability of equipment, etc. There are new processes being or new relief being provided under the State of Emergency Act, which was utilized to lock the country down now, to allow businesses to reopen using these safety protocols. The tourism sector this week started training their different industry members on the tourism guidelines now, and hopefully transportation, etc., is being done in the same way, so that when these subsectors are allowed to fully reopen, the new protocols will be applied across the board. Citizen engagement, again, there are two ways that we've observed these mechanisms working. The most successful cases or situations where countries have been able to control the spread of COVID-19 have come where both citizens, or both public and private enterprises have been engaged, and there's been collaborative effort. There are situations where riots and objection to lockdowns, etc., in certain jurisdictions has led to a large and massive spread of COVID-19. And so we've been very successful in the fact that given the small population and given the importance of it, that the citizenry, for the most part, has listened to the advice that has been given. They have followed the regulations, and they have limited the spread of COVID-19. But this comes with intense citizen engagement. And so in order to do this, there's been constant marketing folks call it a media blitz. There have been daily talk shows that have been put in place both on the radio and on the television. A lot of advertising has been done to ensure that people do understand what changes take place. They also understand in the different stages of both the lockdown and the reopening, how this phased approach allows certain activities to be conducted, but also insisting that with all the activities that are phased into reopening, that the new safety protocols have to be there. And this has been done, as I said, through constant and continuous media, through different formats, social media, uh, radio telecast, television programs. You look at the different publications that have gone out from the Ministry of Health, etc. I think that it has gotten great coverage in our local sector. Technology, and again, I'm moving very fast, so forgive me if I skip one or two things, but technology has perhaps been our greatest ally in this. We have, from the very beginning, realized that people who would be forced to be locked at home and not be able to conduct their daily lives would only really have access to technology, primarily on communication technology. So a lot of effort has been put into that. We're currently working on different technological advancements now to help us in the active processes for contact tracing. So we're working on a contact tracing application, and this is soon going to be a mandatory part of the entry requirements into the country. There's also the development of the Ministry of Health dashboard. This dashboard has, there's one that exists now that they have utilized to be able to help them do the tracing, to help them look at the modeling and monitor and evaluate the status of certain subsectors within the country. So it has allowed us to geographically look at certain areas. Some of you will remember that the initial lockdown for Belize was isolated only to the island of San Pedro. And as the spread moved to the mainland and moved further around, it was systematically extended. And again, this is all possible because the technology that they're using in the back end allows us to do that. We're also now working on a new, well, I hinted to it earlier, but a visitor management app. It's not necessarily for managing the visitor, but what it will do is that in identifying visitor safety, so that there's now a push to look at the technology that can be applied for persons wanting to gain entry to Belize, and the requirement for them to use a paperless entry system. This paperless entry system will mean that there's no more requirement for a customs and immigration form coming into Belize, limited exchange with personnel on that front line, and then that you'll also fill out a personal wellness questionnaire on that form, which will now be on your mobile device. And throughout your visit, should you start to feel or exhibit symptoms of COVID-19 or any other medical ailment at that particular juncture, the app you'll be able to communicate via the app to get that information out. And should they have to do a contact tracing exercise thereafter, it can be done digitally instead of having physical healthcare professionals go out in the field and try and determine everywhere that person has been. Other technology that, again, has been utilized, the COVID relief funds, and this was done really to look at boost programming for small and micro enterprises, also to help to balance or to alleviate some of the unemployment, because during the crisis, a lot of businesses were forced to lay off workers. Secondly, we've also used, and this was done, the technology part of this is that this was done through the Social Security Board's database. And so there was an integration mechanism where people who had lost jobs were able to do an online application. Social Security Board was able to do the vetting through their system. And at the end of the day, if relief was given, it didn't have to be given in cash. It could be given through a credit system where cards could be distributed and picked up with limited face-to-face interactions. That again was first of its kind here for us. The repatriation exercise as well for Belizeans who got stranded abroad during the what is now known as the Great Shutdown. There's an online system. It's still available and up and running on the COVID-19 website. People go on and essentially fill out an application form. They receive approval or vetting from the board that does the screening, and then they're then advised of when the next repatriation flight is scheduled, and they're given a permission to actually purchase their flight tickets, knowing that they will come home and go into mandatory quarantine. But we then know how many Belizeans are stranded abroad. We know where they are, more or less where they're coming from, and so we're able to capture all of this data online before they even enter the country. And also for distribution of food supplies and assistance, this has also been digitized again. So I'm going to just try and keep moving because I know that we're short on time. The next steps for us. One of the things that we fully do understand is that as good as we have been in averting a community spread of COVID-19, that most certainly there will be more cases, and looking at what's happening on the global front with the massive spread and the second and in some cases I want to say the third wave of community spread in some other countries. We're very much adamant that both in terms of balancing the healthcare crisis, which we do not want to open up, we also have to look at the economic balancing for COVID. So all of the practices that I've mentioned above basically will become a permanent part of the oversight structure. We don't see any of this as temporary. We think that all of these measures will become part of day-to-day life. Certainly, things like social distancing and the wearing of masks and other things like that will be around for a long, long time to come. Our non-medical focal areas, essentially, and this focuses on really trying to balance the economy and get it back up and running. Definitely the key priority is the reopening of the airport and the tourism restart. This is extremely dangerous for us as a majority of our market is in North America, and North America now has the highest contingency rate of the spread of COVID-19. Providing support to small businesses to restart the economy. This again comes through trying to mobilize finances and to ensure that the small and micro businesses that need the help the most are able to get that assistance. And there are different programs in place domestically for that as well. Health management. This is a critical area for us. Our healthcare professionals in the country keep explaining to us how difficult and how scarce it is to get testing equipment and to get PPEs and to get basically the what they call the bare essentials that they will need to manage this crisis. So again, this requires a high level of creativity. It requires a lot of discipline that has to be shared and to basically be invoked upon the domestic society. And then, of course, proper and effective fiscal management, because again, with all of these closures, there have been a lot of areas where the economy has been shocked, and we're not certain that we're going to see a complete and utter return, but we also have to look at areas such as diversification, the utilization of technology, minimize spread. There's also what we haven't faced thus far, which is the economic cost of managing the health scare for COVID-19. And so all of these factors have to be in place. We're planning for all of them, and we're trying to make sure that all of the resources that we have are available for the long stay. Another critical resource, again, which falls under fiscal management is something as simple as just ensuring that you have sufficient food supply for your domestic population during these times of crisis. So all of these go into the planning phase. the back and forth discussions that have to happen are taking place. On top of COVID-19, I'll just add that we've been plagued first with a very dry first half of the year. It was near drought-like conditions. Then that was followed by flooding and constant rain conditions, and now we seem to be under the Saharan dust cloud with no idea when that is to be alleviated. So I am saying that just to have everybody understand that while we are focused on COVID-19, there are a lot of other problems that are leading to a complicated matrix that we have to address. So that's basically the presentation in a nutshell. I tried to walk through it as quickly as possible. Certainly there'll be a million questions, but at this time now, Mike.
Thank you, CEO Dujon, for this excellent presentation. Yes, it is a lot of information. The first thing I want to do is congratulate you on the presentation, and definitely the government for their response. It hasn't been easy for any government, to face it, and all the countries present different, reacted in different, or the effects were different in every country. So it is good to see that the curve, it's contained, but yes, of course, the economic implications are great. So I definitely want to thank you for that insightful presentation. As much as probably people will have questions, this is not the moment for a Q&A on the specific response, as we're going to go into the breakout sessions. But we're going to use your presentation as a base for the discussion on the different breakout sessions. If you want to stay and if you have time, CEO Dujon, I invite you to join the tourism breakout session, because most likely there we're going to be following up on issues on your court, and you'll be able to hear the different ideas that are presented there. So thank you very much for your presentation. Just for the participants, we want to make sure that you have this presentation. So we're going to document it as part of this session and share it to you, so you can have it and you can see it as well. And we're going to make sure that we get it from CEO Dujon as well. Just because the time has advanced, this is basically what we have. We have 40 minutes to dialogue. But out of those 40 minutes, we want to make sure that at the end we have some time to reconvene here in this same room, so that the moderators can present the summary of the discussions on the different sessions, right? So there's going to be 3 breakout sessions, one economy and trade, led by Paco Smith, who you see on the screen. As another one on health, which you're going to see, it's going to be led by Juan Manuel Casanueva, who you see there. And the other one on tourism, who's going to be led by me, who I think you're seeing me right now on the screen. Okay, so just a reminder, we share different links on the chat on this session. You'll be able to see there a few things. The form, the commitment form, which you're going to be using in the next session, on the dialogue session. Click on it. It's fillable. You can start typing in. You don't have to save. Everything is saved automatically. Secondly, is the survey. Make sure that you have some minutes to respond to that survey. If you haven't responded already, it's there. And then thirdly, you have a link, just in case. Don't click on it yet, but you have a link to each of the breakout sessions there. Now, if you go to the Teams link and you click on that Teams link on the left of the screen, if you're on a desktop or your mobile, whatever, you find the team link, the team icon, click on it, and it will show the 3 options of going to the 3 breakout sessions. All right, I'm going to give you the get-go, because I'm basically going to count to 3 to make sure that we switch at the same time. If you have any problem, stay in this room. The team is going to be able to walk you through, troubleshoot you on the chat. And obviously, just as soon as you get in the room, get ready, turn on your camera. The moderators will be there. Keep your microphones muted. We're not speaking just to avoid any other noise. Okay, I'm gonna do three things before we move there. There's three things that I want you to think for the next session. First, think on problem areas on that specific breakout session, right? If there's economy, tourism, or health, maybe they're kind of related, but think about the problem areas. What is the problem to be addressed? That's important. What ideas you might have to solve it, what proposals you might have to solve it, what is the solution or service, and third, how to go about it, right? So the problem, what might be a solution, and how we can probably address that solution. So those are the three things that I want you to keep very consistent. And then one thing that I'm going to refer to specifically with the presentation of CEO Dujon is the slide that where he presented the key non-medical focal areas, right? He presented four. Think about it when you're thinking on the problem and the solutions. The first one was reopening the airport to allow to restart the tourism. The second one was support to business to ensure restart of economy. The third one was ongoing health management in an open economy, in an open economy and the reality of businesses. And the fourth one is prudent and proactive fiscal management in an era of deep economic turnouts. So I want you to think about those key non-medical focal areas that CEO Dujon presented while you think about how to address the problems in those specific areas. So without further ado, I want to thank well, very important instruction that I didn't give. You choose the room you want to go. All right, we're not sending you to any specific room. You choose it. So whatever you feel more comfortable with supporting, join. And last response with the moderator, last instruction, which the moderator will tell you, be very brief, please, on your interventions as we run out of time. So we're gonna leave 10 minutes at the end, and we're gonna we'll be passing through the rooms to asking you to come back to this main room. So 10 minutes before 5 p.m. Belize time, and 10 minutes before the hour, wherever you go right now, wherever you are right now, we're gonna cut and come back to the general session. Thank you, Paco. Thank you, Juan. And I'll meet you all in the count of three in the different meetings rooms. 1, 2, and 3. And we had great conversations. Thank you for all those who participated in the conversations. I'm gonna let Juan Manuel go first. How was health, Juan Manuel? Let us know what are the conclusions on that room. Thank you.
It was a very interesting conversation. We would have liked to continue talking. There were basically 4 problems identified, in which then we drilled into solutions to basically one of them. The problems addressed was that people did not wear the right masks or even mask correctly and during the pandemic right now. Also, it was identified as a problem that dengue as a health issue, it was not a priority by the health ministry. Also was identified that quarantine is not being followed by many people. And also the most probably relevant, because we ended up talking more about this problem and how to solve it, is that rural communities have more challenges accessing health services, and that includes that health workers are the ones that travel to provide health services to rural areas have a high turnover and are not supported. No? So based on that conversation, we briefly talked about some solutions that could be interesting to identify to address the mask wearing problem and the social distancing issues, which is that it could be good for the government to communicate more and better protocols how to wear masks, and also there would be a mechanism for citizens to report potential breaks of social distancing protocols in different communities. But the broader conversation went regarding solutions, how to make how to expand and make more sustainable the health services, especially to reach out rural areas and to strengthen and support health workers. And the first thing that was talked about in terms of the solution was that health workers should be involved in to identify what they need, what their incentives are, and what they need to maintain and retain that job and reduce that turnover. Also, it was identified as a potential solution that many of the health workers are traveling back to the capital city of Belmopan to do much of their data reporting, and they should be possibly helped by data reporting systems so they can report what's going on in the communities from the communities in an online platform. We also talked about, even though it's risky and it's more complex, that potential online consultations, doctor consultations, could be potential solutions. And one of the things that was more transversal in terms of the solutions to strengthen the health system in rural areas was that there was a need also to collaborate with civil society, because civil society has the potential to not only support in terms of like review and assess the quality of the data that the health ministry does, but also to promote the health initiatives and even support the service health services expansion, and even to try to bring in funding to support these expansion efforts. So that's basically it in terms of the whole conversation. Very interesting regarding potential solutions and how to go about them in terms of supporting the health situation right now.
Okay, thank you very much, Juan Manuel. Perfect. I'm gonna go next, but it was a good summary, a good discussion. A lot of, 4 problems identified and solutions addressed. I think is the way to go. It's not just for everybody. Again, I reiterate, this process doesn't finish today. No, it's a continued process, and we're gonna be using this input for the remaining of the process of developing an action plan. So we're gonna refine these ideas into the forms. We're gonna have more of this. It's gonna be not only later and not immediately in a month or so, that we most likely gonna have a good round of proposals. And then we'll have the opportunity to all talk about those proposals and try to define better those proposals. Okay, I think we have Paco back. Hi, Paco.
Yes.
Perfect.
Hello.
I'll see you well.
My apologies.
Not a problem. I'll see you well.
Yes.
Only once, and I hear you well as well. So I'm gonna go with my conclusions, and then I'll let you go. How about that?
Sounds
Does that work?
good.
Okay,
Yes.
good. Okay. So we were the tourism breakout session, and we stick to the non-medical focus area that was presented by CEO Dujon. That was reopening airport and tourism. And we approached that in 3 different moments, 2 that are immediate and 1 that is more of a medium long term. The identified problem is opening the airport and reopen tourism in a safely manner, where something that's missing or perhaps not enough or not good quality is available, and that is data. So one of the main issues here and things that need to be addressed is data. tourism has data, and CEO Dujon told us, but we have to be more specific in the kind of data that's needed in order to do this, specifically because we're perhaps seeing an opportunity to modernize into new markets, and then that means that new data, or data that's not existent, will have to be identified and generated. So data is going to be important not only for the new markets, but also because data is needed for the whole entire cycle of reopening the airport and the tourism sector. So the first approach, which is open government based, is actually linked to something that is ongoing right now, and we presented to you at the beginning of this session, which is the hackathon actually. And the hackathon is the combination of data and innovation through open government as well. So developing solutions based on data, what's highly ranked as a priority in order to help the reopening of the airport and reopening of tourism. So keep that in mind. That was the first moment, and it addresses again data in a participatory approach to finding solutions. The second was the absence of a protocol to reopen the airport and the tourism sector right now. So I say the absence because there is no protocol yet, but there is one in the making. And CEO also was remind us of that it's in process. But there's a lot of information that's still missing, but it's in the process. Now, one thing that we identify here to address that is that, yes, a protocol is important and is needed, but it could be strengthened by approaching in a more collaborative approach of having engaged different actors, civil society, and other sectors engaged in the process of helping developing that protocol. So that is as immediate as the hackathon. Whatever is happening right now could be linked to it. So that's an opportunity for open government to add to that and helping in developing that protocol. For something very important also, that is developing trust in the process and in the actual outcome of it. And for that, CEO Dujon also stressed the importance of broadened communication between actors to make sure that everybody is well aware of what's happening, specifically because one thing you were trying to accomplish is having all actors bring their input from all angles to make sure that the delays could be avoided in the whole process of reopening the airport, but also getting tourism into the regions, and that can also by a collaborative approach, improve the holistic approach for that open government that government is having right now. So those are the two first, the two immediate, and the third that is more medium long term. It could be addressed well by the action plan or a commitment, has to do with the question: is the industry, the tourism industry, ready to take on all the tourism wave, right, in a safely manner, and to inform well the tourists. The question here is the industry. I'm gonna say it in this way, but please take it the best way because I'm an external to it. The industry, the tourism industry, is chopped in Belize. So you have industry associations that are based on membership, but of course that doesn't mean that everybody who works or the workforce in the tourism industry is part of those memberships. Again, here a more collaborative approach that engages the different associations with different actors in that tourism industry ecosystem can come and develop a more consolidated approach to taking all the tourism influx will be great, including updated information that could be available right now, but perhaps it's not digitally updated or available. That is directors on tourism stakeholders and services. And a big part of this also, again, a word that has come in all three aspects of the approach is communication. By engaging all actors of the industry, the tourism industry, the communication can be improved and can also agree on developing or digital solutions for having a directory on tourism stakeholders and services available also in the medium and long term. So those are the three approaches there. I'll leave it there. I thank you all who participated on that session, especially CEO Dujan, who was able to participate also, and the EDC as well, who participated on that session, and all other participants. Having said that, I'll give the floor to Paco Smith right now to tell us about how was the economy and trade session go. How did it go? Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I'm still trying to tend with this technology here. I'd just like to begin by first saying that we got a lot of very, very positive input, very, very useful input. And what I found is that a lot of it hinged on some of the fundamental and basic tenets that underscore open government and also good governance. For example, it evolved around the themes of transparency, accountability, citizen participation, and the like. Now, with that said, I'll just go over a few that were presented. First off, we had the input that we need to foster an embrace amongst the public sector with regards to digital technology, and that could be put forth in the form of digitizing services, and hopefully that could yield government or proactive participation. For example, with regards to digitizing licenses for trade, whether it be domestic or externally. So that is one. Another thing that came to the fore was the notion or the implication that we need to improve the level of connectivity among and amidst government entities, that being government offices, departments, ministries, what have you. One of the points that came out also with regards to that is that it goes along the lines of orientation in terms of adopting an ideology amongst the government entities, whereas it's not like your personal fiefdom. Everyone has a part to play, and we collectively play our parts. Not everyone can have all the answers, whether it be intergovernmentally or when it comes to public-private partnerships. Everyone has to come together, and it's someone had given the notion that it involves it's not necessarily a technological issue, but it also can be attributed to a personal issue. So I think that there's a dynamic there that we have to look at, and that ties into the sensitization of the users of the processes. Okay, so we touched on that. Also, like a sublet of that is collaborative participation, and one of the guests touched on both the micro and the macro aspect in relation to sensitizing the public with regards to, excuse me, how they can give their input. And that ties into, number one, proactive outreach, whether it be targeting individual families, at least one person per family, so that they can have an idea or a conceptualization in terms of what they can do from a technological standpoint. So that's just like the participation aspect and the outreach. Let's see. Someone also talked about the proactivity that they've seen in other nations, for example, like at the municipal level. Not everyone has access to internet, but maybe at the city hall or town hall, you can make available maybe a tablet or something like that, and you proactively solicit input from citizens with regards to trade and commerce or what have you. And a next point that came up involved the embracing of technology within the financial sectors. And we're looking specifically with regards to a collaboration between, for example, central bank and the private sector entities, because both of them have inputs that need to be accounted for. Another thing that came to the fore was with regards to the notion of accountability in terms of aid. You know, with the COVID-19 pandemic, Belize has received a considerable amount of aid, whether it be through loans or grants or what have you. But one of the notions coming out of the discussion was that, yes, we hear that we've gotten this aid, but in terms of the accountability for it, how it's been spent, by whom, where, and whatnot, we have to really press that to ensure that all of the individuals or entities that are responsible for the accountability of those funds are held accountable. So if we can find a way to digitize that and ensure that adherence to the law is being put forth. And I think I'll close off with one more. Let's see. Yes, we're talking about all of these things, but an excellent point was in that we can have the best set plans, but we have to ensure that Belize is up to date from a legal standpoint in terms of legislation. So when we're talking about holding individuals accountable through a digital process or a digital facility, we have to ensure that our legislation is up to speed as well. Because we can say it, we can talk about it, but if it's not in the legislation, then that can be an issue. And last but not least, there was something that kind of tied into the tourism industry, so to speak. As you know, the tourism industry is really taking a lick. And one of the recommendations that came out, if I can find it very quickly, yes, was to build on the cultural and creative sectors. And the way I interpret that is maybe looking at value added with regards to some of the natural things we have here in Belize, and we can promote it through maybe a value added approach. And I think that is pretty much it. There was one thing that came up that I really want to touch on very quickly because I didn't have a chance to address it. And it was the issue of nepotism. And we had some not necessarily divergent perspectives, but one of the individuals pointed out that there are certain industries in Belize whereby it shouldn't be looked at as necessarily as being nepotism, so to speak, because, for example, in the engineering field, there's apprenticeships. And that point is well taken. But what I want to say to that is this. We give credence to the fact that there are industries in Belize where there are apprenticeships and maybe there are ins into those particular industries. But that doesn't negate the fact that we have to pay close attention to the reality that beyond that, in other areas, other sectors, particularly when it comes to government per se, that we have to hold the authorities accountable with regards to instances of nepotism, because it does exist. So I think the greater thing is to acknowledge that it exists, acknowledge that it exists in different forms. It could be misinterpreted, but if we don't have the acknowledgement, then we can never address the issue. And that's pretty much it from this end.
Thank you, Paco, for that excellent summary. Thank you all again who stayed with us 40 extra minutes. We had some technical difficulties at the beginning, then joining the different rooms. Hopefully, those technical issues will be solved as we go along. This is the very first session that we have of this type. And so we ask you to please stick with us for the next months that we're going to be working on this. You have on the screen Ms. Audrey Robin. She is the team coordinator there together with Melanie Burns. But she will be your point of contact. Anything that's any questions, please do not hesitate in contact her, and certainly us as well here. Mia will be available in this process. So we are going to do a few things. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to summarize all this and we send it to you. We document it so you can all have it, including the presentation, the different summaries. We're going to make sure that this actually is reflected in the forms that we give you. Those forms will be active. They don't end here. You can access that form that we share at any time. Feel free to write and continue writing not only one idea, feel free to develop more ideas there and propose more ideas. As we're gonna get to a term where we're gonna make sure that we all talk and read all those ideas and make them actual commitments. So keep bringing your input, which it was also a word there during Paco's presentation, and that's a way to give your input. Make sure that you put it there. We're gonna make sure that we raise these issues with authorities as well. So having said that, there are two things that really stand out from the summaries. One of them is we need to improve collaboration. It seems that way. Citizen participation, engagement, and other actors will be very beneficial in these three sectors. So that's something that this project will continue to support. And the other one is more data and more information, which I think is got an impact on the actual development of the sectors, but the trust by the citizens on the processes. So that's going to be including accountability, of course, and having some mechanisms to follow what's happening with the aid funds, as Paco was mentioned as well. All those are issues that can be addressed, and I encourage you to think about those lines through specific commitments. So if it's opening data or developing certain solutions, mechanisms to monitor based on that data, those are the things that could be translated into a specific commitment, and I encourage you to do so. So thank you all who participated. I'm sorry that we took that much of your time. I want to thank also Juan Manuel Casanueva, who's there, Social TIC, who's been battling these fields for many years, and he's got a real firsthand experience. I really enjoy and like the fact that he's able to support this process just by supporting with the moderation. Paco, the other moderator of the other session, thank you very much. And of course, to all the participants who were there participating, writing, raising your voice. Let's continue to do this and keep in touch. As of now, last recommendation, fill out the form and fill out the survey as well. We're still gonna send you the links if you haven't done it, so you can do it. And thank you very much for your time. Enjoy beautiful Belize or wherever you are.
Thanks everybody, and stay safe.